Welcome to another podcast at JFK Inside Job. My name is Richard Gilbride, and this presentation is titled Elevators Tell No Lies. It's a great privilege to be sharing this research 60 years after the horrific assassination of President Kennedy, and a rare opportunity to present the truth as we can best discern it to our own generation and to the generations yet to come. Keeping this very obvious conspiracy a secret for 60 years now has been one of the root causes of our American Republic's runaway malaise, which today is in a tailspin from which it will likely never recover. Its saving breath may perhaps be drawn from the revolutionary idea that JFK's murder has indeed been solved in perpetuity. One idea may conceivably spark this once great nation and save it from its coming ruin. This ambush involved numerous shooters in a well-coordinated attack. The throat shot was fired from one of the rectangles in the pergola, in my personal opinion, and it delivered a fast-acting toxin that immobilized the target. About 6 seconds later, diversionary shots were fired from both the sixth-floor sniper's nest and from the stockade fence. This grassy knoll shot not only deflected the initial search away from the depository, but served as a red herring for future criminological investigations. The actual kill shot came from the south storm drain, which aligned with a 23.5-degree trail of debris through the president's right temple found at the autopsy. There was a further headshot from the second floor of the Daltex and additional shots, but this reconstruction is only speculative after all. Is only my opinion and is not an exact science. The solution I am going to present to you here is an exact solution. But it is only a partial solution of the immense conspiracy which took John F. Kennedy's life. If I may borrow an analogy from tensor physics, where we sometimes obtain a set of 256 differential equations to describe gravitational phenomena, but only obtain precise numerical values for a portion of these, a subset of 16 or so, obtaining that small portion still justifies the correctness of the fundamental principles of general relativity. And similarly, this partial solution to the Kennedy assassination leads unmistakably and irrevocably to the complicity of the national security state. Understanding Oswald as a self-described patsy who never fired a shot, and with photographic vestiges of killers lingering in the east and west windows of the sixth floor, it behooves us to account for how they escaped from the Texas School Book Depository. Coupled with that understanding is the overwhelming indication from the available evidence that Oswald was in the second floor lunchroom during the shooting sequence. To wit, in 1971, Jack Dougherty said he'd seen him eating his lunch there sometime after finishing his own lunch downstairs in the domino room. In 1978, Carolyn Arnold came forward and said she saw him in there at 12:25, 5 minutes before the assassination. In 1991, James Hosty admitted that Oswald had told his interrogators he was in the lunchroom during the assassination. In 2018, we learned that Sarah Stanton encountered him on the second floor landing holding a soda. And in 2021, Wesley Fraser recalled hearing about a half-eaten cheese sandwich and an apple seen on one of the lunchroom tables by Roy Truly and Officer Marion Baker when they encountered Oswald 70 to 80 seconds after the shooting sequence. Truly and Baker had each described him as calm and collected in their 1964 testimony. Based on these witness statements alone, we are hard-pressed to place Lee Harvey Oswald in that sniper's nest. And we are compelled to determine just how the individuals comprising the sixth floor hit team got down to the first floor undetected. And sure enough, the West Freight elevator descended while Truly and Baker were in the lunchroom and climbing the corner stairwell. Here is an escape method not only feasible and straightforward, but supported by numerous lines of evidence. First is this major anomaly of the West elevator making its way down while the first responding policeman was making his way up the rear stairs. Any school kid could have figured out that that's when the bad guys escaped the building, but nothing was put in the newspapers about a missing west elevator. This information was suppressed from the general public. And a year later, the Warren Report ignored the simultaneity of the descending elevator and the ascending police officer, and instead assured us that neither elevator could have been used by Oswald as a means of descent. Secondly, Truly finally specified in his March testimony that he led the way up the stairs, but he had told the National Guardian just beforehand and the Detroit Free Press back in December that it was Baker who went up first. Truly was feeding disinformation to the press, apparently to avoid inquiry as to why he had no fear of possibly encountering a maniacal gunman. Baker would soon caution him up on the 7th that this man will blow your head off. Thirdly, the route they took to get to the roof didn't permit a view of the 6th floor. Both freight elevators had been stationed on the 5th, and once they got up there, Truly could see the east elevator through the half-empty shaft, and he directed Baker's attention to that east elevator, which they took up to the 7th. This peculiar route hints suspiciously of a planned reason for stationing the elevators on the 5th. Fourth, Truly had problems initially summoning an elevator, but nothing was mentioned of this until his Warren Commission testimony, not to the FBI, DPD, or Secret Service. He rang the service bell and twice yelled up the shaft, but allegedly Jack Doherty did not hear him. This snippet about the elevator episode was hidden from the other investigative agencies, because again, it hints suspiciously of a planned pantomime, staged to alert the escapees upstairs that a first responder had arrived. Fifth, Truly chaperoned Doherty's Secret Service interview and cut it off prematurely. He claimed Doherty was mentally retarded and has been especially confused since the assassination. Yet Doherty had a key to the building and performed routine daily maintenance checks, and was elsewhere characterized by Truly as intelligent and smart and a hard worker. Doherty would testify that he did nothing after the war until he started working for the Depository Company in 1952. He had received a medical discharge after 2 years' service in the Army, where he was stationed at Freeman Field in Indiana, the Central Allied Repository for captured Nazi technology. More than a bit curious when you consider that Mind Control Ultra had its origins in wartime Germany. Another suspicious hint that not everything is mum and apple pie at the Texas School Book Depository. 6. A portion of Truly's characterization of Doherty got deleted, and the dictabel recording containing that deleted excerpt is still off limits at the National Archives. It remains a closely guarded United States secret. 7th, Doherty gave a nebulous accounting of his lunchtime whereabouts. He was alone inside the building, claimed not to watch the motorcade, and nobody said that they ever saw him. After a short lunch, he inexplicably went back to the 6th floor and then down to the 5th, allegedly to get some stock. But it made no sense for him to be doing this, returning upstairs on his own and commencing with work unrelated to what he had been doing all morning. He told the Secret Service in December that he had been working with the floor-laying crew on the 6th and had taken the elevator down with them just before noon. 8. Doherty was protected by shapers of the official narrative. In his testimony, he was allowed to deny being part of the floor-laying crew and to claim he took an elevator down alone just before lunch. It took more than 50 years before a positive photo ID of the guy was acknowledged, and we still have no record of who took him down to the police station that afternoon. 9. What Doherty told the police was physically impossible. He claimed he took the west elevator down from the 5th to the 1st upon hearing a shot and talked to janitor Eddie Piper, which Piper was never even asked about. Yet we know the speed of the elevators from the FBI time trials. It's 7.8 seconds per floor. Doherty would have needed a bare minimum of 70 seconds to go down and back up, because once Truly and Baker had run to the back of the building and looked up the shaft, both elevators were stationed up on the 5th. and they arrived there well under 70 seconds after the president was shot, meaning Doherty could not have begun his descent until after Trulian Baker had started up the stairs. He obfuscated his reactions in his police affidavit, which reeks of a prepared alibi. 10. After Truly's testimony, the Warren Commission produced an internal memo titled The Mystery of the West Elevator. They were unsure how to explain why it was missing, and no one had yet admitted that they'd taken it downstairs. Why would they even bother asking about this elevator unless there was something fishy going on in its regard? 11. Doherty told both the Dallas police and the FBI that he brought the West elevator right back to the 6th after he had descended. Not only did he have no fear of confronting possible assassins, the timing of his return trip coincided with a witness sighting by law clerk Lillian Mooneyham, who saw a man in a sniper's nest 4.5 to 5 minutes after the assassination. The nebulous post-assassination events within the depository come into sharp focus when we view them through the lens of Doherty bringing the assassins down in the West elevator. Believe it or not, this was conjectured as far back as 1965 in an analysis titled 19 against Lyndon Johnson. And to pull this off, Doherty had to have coordinated with Roy Truly, who diverted Officer Baker via the lunchroom encounter with Oswald and thereupon climbed a noisy wooden stairwell. This depository paradigm, the West elevator escape, suggests that Oswald, assigned to the lunchroom during the motorcade, was assigned a job within the assassination plot of helping to protect the descending elevator from detection. Hence, he lured Baker into the lunchroom by flinching away suspiciously from the vestibule window. As an experienced spy, he could be counted on to pull this maneuver off. Oswald was perfect fodder for a patsy because, during that first weekend, kept in the dark about the investigation and facing the ludicrous charge that he had shot the president, he was unlikely to betray any fellow plotters. And it goes without saying that the 6th floor crime scene search was conducted by officers privy to the elevator escape. They made several notable errors attempting to frame Oswald for the assassination, like with the Mannlicher Carcano rifle's magic ammunition clip. 8 minutes after the escape, power was shut off completely to the elevator system. This coincided with the first couple minutes of the police search of the building. This power shut-off was confirmed in the spring testimonies of Victoria Adams and Luke Mooney, who noted it in his next-day report to Sheriff Bill Decker. But this alarming bit of information did not leave the sheriff's office and did not find its way into any other investigative agency, nor even into the Warren report. And its significance escaped the scrutiny of every first, second, and third generation researcher you can name. Someone in-house was obviously trying to delay the search of the upper floors. Something with the evidence on the 6th floor had to be properly prepared before the police search. Yet we have already mentioned the high likelihood that Doherty was in that sniper's nest 4.5 to 5 minutes after the assassination. He took care of his preparations post-haste, and there was no requirement for an elevator power shut-off to retard the police search. What occurred was a redundancy. It wasn't warranted by the demands of the moment. We can conclude that it had been incorporated into the depository's assassination planning, and it nearly blew the plot wide open. When the elevator power went out, 2 Treasury agents were searching the 4th floor and had to go down by the stairs. These were the 2 plainclothes officers Luke Mooney ran into when he abandoned the West Freight elevator. And at least 2 other Treasury agents were also inside searching the building. Someone must have loudly drawn attention to the fact that the elevators weren't working, and power must have been restored right away. Yet there are no details of this incident in their after-action reports, because those reports simply disappeared. There isn't a researcher in the JFK community who can refute these facts as I've outlined them about elevator mischief in the depository just after the president's murder. Monkey business with the elevators that got suppressed. I first presented this paradigm back in 2009 and have been tightening it up ever since, yet I am treated as if I were radioactive. This is because I've shown complete contempt for the barroom scholarship which has domineered this community the past decade. The sophistry which has masqueraded as a criminological investigation of the Book Depository. I am referring specifically to PrayerMan and the lunchroom hoax. These hypotheses will be ridiculed as mentally defective in another 20 years. Max Planck, the discoverer of the quantum, remarked that progress in physics is often not possible until the previous generation dies off, and it will be the same for future JFK scholars who will abandon the wishful thinking of the present age. The proponents of PrayerMan and the lunchroom hoax and their reputable enablers will be rightly regarded as sophomoric oafs, inherently incapable of distinguishing fact from fiction. Progress will eventually prevail when all these sophists die their physical deaths. Truth is always invincible, since it rests upon a foundation of God-given reason and sober judgment. The PrayerMan figure unequivocally is situated at the front of the depository landing and thereby measures a full head shorter than the 6 foot 1/4 inch Wesley Fraser, who is standing at the center. No legitimate height determination has ever matched up the 5'9" Lee Harvey Oswald, and the cult-like advocates offer no legitimate reason as to why no one ever mentioned seeing Oswald out there during the motorcade. Fraser in fact denied seeing him and said he spoke to Secretary Sarah Stanton moments after this footage was taken. Having failed by film forensics to certify this blurry figure was Oswald, the cult has resorted to insinuating that James Hostey's belatedly discovered notes are proof that Oswald went outside to watch P parade, cherry-picking a piece of evidence out of context, imbuing it with a meaning it does not ordinarily have, which is their customary method of deception. Secret Service Inspector Thomas Kelly explicitly asked him the next morning, in the presence of 7 other law enforcement officers, whether he had watched the parade, and he said he had not. Had Oswald actually been on the landing during the presidential parade, why on earth didn't he declare that to the press in the hallway when they asked him if he shot the president? Hostey's extraneous notes actually referred to Oswald being on the landing 3 or 4 minutes after the assassination. This correlates with the notes of Captain Fritz and the solo report of James Bookhout, who each state that Oswald was out on the landing with Bill Shelley. The Fritz notes, Bookhout report, and the Hostey notes are in fact each structured as the same specific 3-part drama. In Act 1, Oswald is on the 2nd floor getting a Coke. Act 2, he goes to the 1st floor. In Act 3, he goes out to the landing. In Act 1, Fritz and Bookhout mentioned the encounter with the police officer, which Hostey omitted. In Act 3, they mentioned the encounter with Shelley, which Hostey again omitted. Oswald, along with these men, at his first interrogation, had actually told them that during the shooting, he was on the 2nd floor. This is what Fritz initially stated in his testimony, until he was directed by Attorney Ball to return to the narrative that had been scripted into his police report. Oswald was asked the most obvious of questions, his whereabouts during the assassination, yet his interrogators did not relinquish their notes about this to the Warren Commission. The remnants that turned up years later all sync up again with the purchase of a Coca-Cola and proceed with their 3-part drama. That drama was initiated, again, according to Fritz's testimony, by the encounter with Officer Baker in the 2nd floor lunchroom, where Oswald said he was eating his lunch, which correlates with what Jack Doherty, Carolyn Arnold, James Hostey, Sarah Stanton, and Wesley Fraser all told their respective latter-day interviewers. We have, all told, no epistemological justification for extracting Hostey's belated notes from the context of the 3-fold interrogated data set and fantasizing that these notes alone provide information about Oswald's whereabouts. Not when Fritz's testimony is telling us Oswald was on the second floor at the time of the shooting. Not when Kelly's Secret Service report says he denied watching the parade. To offer these notes as evidence he was on the landing at the time in question is first-order malarkey, just a clever sophist lie. In closing, I would like to emphasize the responsibility our generation has to pay this hard-won knowledge forward. In another generation, the freight elevator escape will be looked upon as self-evident and established fact. Those of you with access to media contacts or video dissemination would do a great service to President Kennedy's memory by spreading this lecture as widely as possible. The research is absolutely 100% accurate, supported by a dozen pieces of evidence. Imagine if, a few months after the assassination, the American people knew that the Book Depository Company had only moved into Dealey Plaza the winter beforehand, and that immediately after JFK's murder, there had been monkey business with the depository elevators, monkey business which got suppressed. The only entity capable of orchestrating such a diabolical maneuver is the national security state. Thank you for your time. May God bless you.